So I'm here to introduce our second keynote of the event. This is Jeff Grabill. He is chair of the Department of Writing, Rhetoric, and American Cultures and the Associate Provost for Teaching, Learning, and Technology at Michigan State University. His work has been featured in 3 C's, Computers and Composition, and Community Literacy Journal, among many, many others. He has published chapters recently on assessment and civic engagement, citizen action, and supporting knowledge work in writing in diverse environments. In addition to these and his many other accomplishments, he is a senior researcher with the Writing Information and Digital Experience Research Center at MSU. And I want to show you, I know you guys can't see this. I left this accidentally at registration to run an errand, and when I came back, there's a note in blue pen. It is in neither my handwriting nor Jeff's handwriting, and it says, and he promises to buy the first round of beer bowling. I don't know where it came from, but I'll float that one out there. His talk is titled, Do We Learn Writing Best Together Alone? Your Life with Robots.
Well, thank you. Can you hear me? No. Can you hear me? No. Can you hear me?
No, that was there.
It's on.
Now can you? No. No. Yes. No.
You got another one?
It doesn't get much more than that.
I know, it's like
This will be an adventure. Watch Jeff swallow a microphone. All right, we can do this. So it's actually, most of the time in my career, I would be absolutely terrified to follow Cindy or Dickie. But tonight I'm thrilled to, because I've been following them my entire career. And as the video is wonderful, and yes, I mean, everything that everybody said about how important they are to their personal career is certainly true for me. And how sadly they will be missed. This is kind of a sad moment, although Cindy will be pissed at me for saying this. But it's also a tremendous moment because this room, this meeting is made possible substantially by the work of the two of them. And so we owe them another round. So if I'm buying anybody beer, it's the two of them. All right, let's do this. So in 2010, I helped. So I should acknowledge Mike is all of my robots broke. So Mike's going to advance my slides for me. So this talk is going to advance in 4 parts. And so each part is equally about 20 to 25 minutes long. Thank you for laughing. No, I was saying to the people who are taking care of us, I'm now 37 minutes late on my first drink of the night, so we will not be going on forever here. So 4 parts, and I'm going to walk you through that. Some of them will move faster than others. So in 2010, I helped Bill Hart-Davidson and Mike McLeod write a short piece on what we saw as important for the near future of computers and writing. And our answer was one word: robots. We wrote something like this. We believe we are already seeing the beginning of the next wave of technologies that will bring about large-scale changes in how written communication is practiced and how it's valued. It will not be a single linchpin technology like the printing press, nor will it be a platform like the internet. It won't even be a protocol. It will be a class of small or small-ish automated analytic functions assigned to do tasks that are incredibly tedious, repetitive, distributed in space, and perhaps time. This will be a new class of little machines driven by logic but put to work for explicitly rhetorical purposes. Robots. We argued for why robots can write and named a few of the ways that robots will be, and certainly presently are, engaged in many writing practices, augmenting and extending human capability across what we have accepted for thousands of years to be the range of rhetorical performance: invention, arrangement, style, memory, and delivery. We encouraged our audience not to fear robots, but rather build robots, or otherwise engage deeply with the many issues that robots raise for how we write and how we learn to write. So it's now 2016, and I can confidently report that identifying robots in relation to the future of writing can no longer be seen as controversial or particularly insightful, even if it was or was not in 2010. I got to tell you, 2010, most people just laughed at us. I can also report that lots of people have been paying attention to robots and making them. There are a great many robots designed to write and to teach writing. But I can't report that writing teachers or writing experts or very many of us in this room have engaged. We have left this important work to others. We've been interested in other things. We've made a big mistake. And in my happy-go-lucky talk tonight, thank you for laughing again. You're hitting all your marks. There probably aren't many more jokes. You may be laughing at me, but there probably aren't many more jokes. I'm going to try and unpack that mistake a little bit tonight. What was opportunity in 2010 is a challenge at the present moment. So, part one. You can go ahead, Mike. There we go. So part one is on the Chomsky-Norvig debate on artificial intelligence and science. So with this first part, I want to dip our big toes into particular forms of machine intelligence, because in referring to robots tonight, I'm really referring to the application of machine learning techniques to learning writing. I focus on what became known as the Chomsky-Norvig debate, an exchange that started at MIT at about the same time that we wrote about robots, during a celebration of work on an artificial intelligence and its relationship to cognitive science and computer science. Chomsky, of course, is arguably the most important linguist of the 20th century, whose work is foundational to many machine learning approaches. Peter Norvig is one of the planet's foremost experts on artificial intelligence, who is just as well known for leading the research operation at Google. And I should state clearly at the outset that Les Perlman has been my guide here, pointing me to this debate as important and talking to me about his own current work that speaks to the issues that I'll lay out here. So it's always fun to talk to Les while he's baking, which is what you get when you talk to people who are retired, Sidney and Dickie. So here's a simple take on the debate. Chomsky still wishes for an elegant theory of intelligence and language that helps us understand thinking in language. That's been his project for his entire career. Chomsky argues that only models, deep theoretical conceptual models, help us advance science and human understanding. Norvig is said to believe in truth by statistics. The chase for models, in Norvig's view, is too slow and is probably misguided. We won't ever get there. With enough data, the thinking goes, we can solve real problems without modeling. We can solve them instead with what Norvig calls an algorithmic modeling culture. With regard to language, what we might call the Google approach, that algorithmic modeling culture approach, is used to deploy increasingly advanced statistical reasoning and techniques to produce real solutions, and they do produce real solutions to, say, stylistic analyses of writing and machine-provided feedback to students about writing quality. The goal is not to develop a more sophisticated understanding of language. It is to try to get more data and build more powerful analytical tools. All of this is directly relevant to writing and the teaching of writing and the learning of writing. But there are no clear good guys and bad guys in this conversation. They're both right. Having said that, however, and inspired by Perelman still because he's going to kill me if I don't take the position I'm about to take, I'm going to briefly lay out a problem that takes up that position. It's the Chomsky position, and in many respects it's also Les's position. I also learned in talking to Les while he was baking that he and Chomsky used to carpool into MIT. Can you imagine being in that car? Okay. So I've been trying to imagine being in that car. I don't know what I would do. I don't know. So Chomsky wishes for an elegant theory of intelligence and language that looks past human fallibility to try to see simple structures underneath. I mean, once again, as I said, that explanatory theoretical model that enables science. And so in Chomsky's own world, we get this. And he writes, this is actually a transcription, so it's a little bit incoherent at the beginning. He says, in my own field, language fields, it's all over the place. Like computational cognitive science applied to language. The concept of success that's used is virtually always this. So if you get more and more data and better statistics, you can get a better and better approximation to some immense corpus of text, like everything in the Wall Street Journal archives. But you learn nothing about the language. Let's dwell there for a minute. You learn nothing about the language. The analogy here, and I am confident that this is fundamentally Perelman's argument, is that machine intelligence, as applied to writing, gives new and genuinely interesting patterns and even predictions, but we learn very little about writing. Let me go over this again. I'm going to be crystal clear on this. The whole point of learning technologies in a writing classroom is to help human beings, teachers as well as students, learn something about writing. Period. That is the function. If the machine does not facilitate learning, then it isn't useful. It might be smart, it might be amazing, it might be lovely. We've made some of these machines at Wide, but it is fundamentally useless. What's worse, and I know Perelman worries about this a great deal, the machines might actually do harm. So I'm stealing it here from Les again, actually explicitly stealing from his slides. So these are Les's worries about machine intelligence as applied to the teaching and learning of writing. He worries that software doesn't do what it tells students and teachers it can do. And there's two reasons for this. One is marketing messages. Right? Marketing messages tend to overextend what machines can do, but I don't see that as fundamentally the culprit. I think fundamentally the culprit is the fact that we're not particularly intelligent consumers about what machines can do. So we assume that they could do more than they can do. And Les has some work coming out in which he sort of unpacks very simple reasons for why they can't do what they think they can't do what we think they can do. Including high error rates and high false positives. So even a machine that we've been using for decades and decades, Microsoft's Word grammar checker, which most of you are good writing teachers, so you don't want your students to use it, and you don't want your students to use it because it produces so many high false positives, right? So these machines are not particularly good at what we think they do. Two, the metrics driving the analytics are irrelevant to good writing and communication. The machines can do amazing things, but they can't do what they can't do. Right? So when we build machines, when we build machine intelligence to analyze writing, we build it within the boundaries of what the algorithms can do. Those algorithms don't line up particularly well with what we understand good writing and good human communication to do. So the machines do what the machines do well, which brings us to Les's third concern, and that is the associated pedagogy drives on-demand writing and prompts that the robots are trained to handle. And you see this right now with Turnitin, which has bought some very powerful machine learning. And all of their professional development work with teachers right now is focused on pushing teachers to use the prompts that Turnitin provides them, and only the prompts that Turnitin provides them. And they do that because the machine that Turnitin has trained is very good on the prompts and completely worthless on everything else. Now, what I also know, despite the people in this room, is that as an externally bought courseware for teaching writing, you have Turnitin on all of your campuses. Think about that for a minute. Have you dislodged it? We haven't dislodged it at MSU yet. So we can feel good, smug even, about the concerns and the critique that I've summarized here. We know better, we think. We don't dabble in these sorts of machine-driven pedagogies and practices. Maybe. Or maybe we're just irrelevant. In the marketplace right now, there are at least 8 serious products that promise to improve writing via some form of robot. And there are many more robots running around out there embedded in other things. Almost none of them were developed by teams with anything close to the fraction of the writing expertise assembled in this room. If we look at some of the most interesting research on peer learning, research that is located in the domain of writing instruction for all sorts of interesting reasons. And so we pay attention, and you'll understand in a minute if you don't know already, why my colleagues and I pay a lot of attention to the research on peer learning. Most of the best research right now is in the domain of writing. It's peer learning and writing. None of the researchers are writing researchers. Our absence is not simply a problem, it's a disaster. Not simply for teachers and students, but for this nice world we live in, composed of humanist writing and technology experts. Let me put a fine point on it and be argumentative. We should know better. We have chosen to be irrelevant because we haven't, as a group, engaged the necessary research and development work to be relevant. The work that others are doing with technologies for learning to write has the potential to impact millions of learners. Which brings me to my short interlude on robots. Now, which is really a short interlude on the difference between educational technologies and learning technologies. Now, this is a pretty geeky crowd. So I almost attempted sort of science fiction-y sorts of images, but as Mike knows better than anyone, that's just not my world. So I went with this, which in 2010 we probably thought that this is what we had in mind for robots, and this might be what you have in mind for robots. But as you can probably figure out, what I really think is we should have this in mind for robots. So this is the robot that's in my head right now. But I actually want to move quickly to the table. And any of you, those of you with a memory of Shoshana Zuboff's work from ages ago on the difference between automating and informating technologies, will see her work in this table. And one of the things that we've been working with at Michigan State and also with Eli are the distinctions between educational technologies or technologies for and learning technologies or technologies with. And I will tell you that one of the privileges of being an associate provost for teaching, learning, and technology is that I can suggest that my campus adopts this heuristic for thinking about our learning technology investments as well. And they kind of listen to me. It's completely awesome. I have no idea, nobody listens to me. So, real quick, I mean, you can see the table. And it's a simple distinction, but it's an important heuristic. And I want to suggest to you that you can apply this heuristic to a lot of the technologies that are on your campus and a lot of the technologies that are in the marketplace. And this heuristic has been most useful for me, and it actually comes out of the work I've been doing for the last 3 years with high school teachers in the state of Michigan. Because they're at the front lines of this, much more so than we are. So technologies for automate teacher work. And if we had more time, I would tell you stories of my decade of venturing through the educational venture capital world, where they are out to replace you. Replace the teacher, focus on testing, focus on summative feedback, deprofessionalize teacher work, and free. I want to dwell for a minute on free, because academic humanists might be the last creatures on the planet who actually believe that there is something called free. There is no such thing as free. You're paying for it. You might be paying for it by making your students give up their personal data. You might be paying for it by giving up your personal data. You might be paying for it by not choosing to pay for a company or a service that could actually provide you with some technical and learning support. You're paying for it. And so one of the most insidious moves in educational technology in K-12 that I've observed up close is schools' penchant for free on the surface, which costs them dearly downstream. Particularly takes its toll on the lives of teachers and the lives of students. So if I can convince this room of one thing tonight, because I'm being argumentative, it's to convince you that there is absolutely no such thing as free. And that when you're confronted with free, you're confronted with that nasty robot. That's the nasty robot. And you should be asking some very hard questions of people who are peddling free. So who gets hurt? I need another slide. There we go, Mike. See, Mike was a good robot. He would just do it. This is why I care so deeply. I care deeply about who gets hurt first and who gets hurt worst. The largest classes and programs, the poorest schools and students, the most poorly prepared teachers and supported teachers, the communities most anxious about test scores and educational attainment. They lose first, and they lose worst. So I'm going to move, see how I'm moving, I'm like already to part 3. I'm going to give you a short history of Eli. which is a learning technology we invented quite a long time ago now at Michigan State, because I want to put our own work on the table for inspection. Because when we started this part of our work, we saw ourselves as part of the conversation that I'm laying out for you today. In other words, I'm going to explain to you what Eli is, where it came from, and I'm also going to unpack for you why we started a company as a way to get that technology out to the world. Simply put, we started a business as the best way to change how writing is taught in the United States. That is the mission of the organization. Our goal and how we measure ourselves is whether or not we change the way writing is taught in the United States. Now, I've been around the block long enough to know that when I say things like this in front of faculty, that if there's not explicit eye rolling in the room, you're rolling your eyes. I'm no dummy. But this is how we think, and this is how we act, and this is how we believe, and this is what we do. And that's what we're focused on. So I'm going to unpack that for you, because to this audience, I have just made a crazy claim, which is another way of saying that this might seem odd, if not contradictory decision. That is, why in the world, if that is your goal, would you start an organization characterized as a business? So let me begin by telling you the story of where Eli came from. So Eli was invented on accident. We were doing an experiment with our College of Business on a very tight, focused, modular approach to business communication. So no appetite for a 15-week course. We had these tight little time sequences in which we were teaching a brand new curriculum. And we decided to take the opportunity in this new instructional context to take a very careful look at both the research and the pedagogical literatures, at what really moves the needle. Not just in writing instruction, but in learning, period. And we learned some things that we confirmed some things that we thought we learned, but we learned a lot of things that, we relearned a lot of things that we'd forgotten. And because of that, we focused on two pedagogical practices that, regardless of the domain, move the needle in learning environments. Big oomph, as I like to say. One is feedback. I'm not going to say anything that's going to surprise you. I'm going to say a few things that we don't see in an awful lot of writing classrooms, but I'm not going to say anything that's going to surprise you. Providing students with high quality feedback, big mover. Interesting side note from the literature, students can often learn more from providing feedback than receiving it. So if you build a feedback-rich classroom in which students are providing and receiving feedback, you get a double learning move. Second, revision. We should know this. There's a huge literature on the importance of revision in learning and writing, but also in other domains. So in this compressed time frame, we built a curriculum that got more and more feedback and revision loops, and we were failing miserably. And we were failing. We weren't very good. That's one reason we were failing miserably. But we were also failing miserably because we had all of the technologies. We had a technological problem. We had all the technologies that you have right now and that we still have, right? But there were two things. One, we had to be faster. We just had to be faster. And downloading a bunch of papers from a learning management system is not fast. But the second is more important. You can't teach what you can't see. And you can't ask students to provide feedback and expect it to be good. You have to teach it. You can't ask students to revise and expect them to do it well. You have to teach it. It's not enough to assign it, it has to be taught. And so in order to teach those two really important learning moves with students, we had to make all of that work visible to them. So because we have amazing people like Mike in our research group, we put a research team in the back of the room, and ducks that tape twine, we built a thing called Eli. And it was good. I like the back of the room. You can be part of it. You can come along with me to every time I have to do this. So, but once we made it, we had decisions to make, right? Do we write about it? So my mom and 6 other people can read about it? There are some of you in this room who know my mother. Do we give it away? Do we put it on a shelf? Lots of universities have lots of beautiful things sitting on shelves. Do we make it an open source project? We thought long and hard about this because we knew then, but we didn't really realize how deep this decision was, that the decision we made at that moment was the most important high stakes argument we would make in our entire careers. which is another way of saying, one of the ways I want you to understand Eli and the project around it is as an argument about how to behave as an academic in our field. You may disagree with us, but we're making an argument. So we're academics. By disposition and ideology, we're inclined to give away ideas and other forms of IP. We publish, we share, and we're delighted when people listen, take up our ideas, and make them better. But there wasn't then, and I don't think there still is today, a community of writing teachers, researchers, and digital humanists willing and capable of supporting complex, long-term, open source, or similarly shared projects. There aren't many, if any, to my knowledge, good examples of sustained, sustainable, and impactful open source educational projects. Most of them, to the present moment, are backstopped by organizations with cash. Moodle, backstopped by Blackboard. We also know that there is no such thing as free, as I've said, and that the adoption of a pedagogy like Eli requires support. So let me go over that again. Eli is not a technology. It is a pedagogy scaffolded ever so lightly, gently, and lovingly by a technology. In other words, the effective use of Eli requires a network of relationships to support it. The most important thing that happens when Eli is used well is that teachers grow their art as teachers. To sustain high-quality software and high-quality professional learning around that software requires resources that are predictable and reliable. We work with schools in Detroit that cannot stomach us not answering the phone when they have a problem. They break. And that requires a sustainability model that led us to start, run, and maintain an organization that can make sustainable decisions. Our argument is that if we provide a high-quality learning technology, fundamentally a proven pedagogical scaffold plus analytics, and the professional learning to support highly effective teaching and learning, then we will be a good partner for others. And we measure ourselves based on our ability to help students and teachers learn, which is why the table you've been looking at, if you've been looking at it, I'll read it to you, made me cry a little bit the first time I saw it. Moving the needle is the bottom line measure for us. And so what you're seeing over time is a pretty dramatic growth in the number of classrooms using our pedagogy, assigning writing tasks, feedback moments, and revision tasks to students. This is most gratifying in our work in high school in Michigan, where because of all sorts of constraints, the simple assignment of a writing task was almost impossible. I'm most proud of the work that the teachers in Michigan high schools have done with the pedagogy that we were able to help them implement. All right, last slide. I'm almost done. In this room and in our field, we have lots of ways to think about technologies in relationship to writing, just as we also have lots of ways to think about writing. Tonight I'm focusing our attention on technologies that support learning and writing in ways that are fairly commonplace. And I am absolutely insisting that this is where the most important action is right now. Important because it impacts many thousands, if not millions of learners. Important because the implications, both positive and negative, are highly stratified. Poor students, students in struggling schools, students whose first language is not English, and students whose community and home languages are not mainstream are being given bad robots. Important because the most commonly used technology to support learning and writing on my campus, except for Eli, is Turnitin. Important because so many of these robots understand learning and writing as a fundamentally individualized activity involving a student, a computer, and an algorithm. Do we really think that writing is best learned in isolation, via a narrow and empty notion of personalized learning? Or do we think writing is one of the few things that makes us fundamentally human, and that is learned in conversation with others? If we believe that, it's time to engage. It's time to use our own pedagogies and our own technologies. It's time to think about how they scale and to make them scale. It's time to make pedagogy in a way that is scalable and will have oomph in the world. It's time to fix our gaze on the millions of learners who are being taught with technologies made by people who know very little about writing and about learning to write. So it's one thing for us as researchers to say, my work is this, and I'm interested in that. I've said those things my entire career. It's another thing entirely, however, to say, the world needs me to solve this problem. The world needs you to solve some problems. Thank you. So I'm told I have time for 3 questions.
You can go 4.
Oh, I can go 4. I would have taken 2.
Oh, there. I will run.
So do we engage with your robot, or what robot should we then go out and build?
Why, thank you. So we don't have a robot. And one of the things that we're struggling with right now, so we're just a terrible company. We really suck. And we're really bad at what we do in so many ways.
I took care of the slides.
Yeah. So we don't have a robot, and we've made some very considered philosophical decisions. One is that have hurt us. One is I've got a robot.
I made it in the workshop with
Thank you.
Gail.
I love it so. So,
For GRN.
all right.
Yeah.
So one is that we decided we don't have a robot. We don't have any machine intelligence. And the other decision that we made is that we don't let teachers participate in peer learning activities. Why the hell would you want to? Seriously, people, I'm talking to some of you in this room. You're going to screw up the peer learning. All the peer learning people say, don't let them do that. That would be awful. It ruins peer learning. And the second thing, well, never mind. I'm going on and on about that. Yeah, I mean, so obviously we believe in what we've done. We believe deeply in what we've done. And so we think the pedagogy is very, very, very good when used effectively. But lots of things are. So I'm much more interested in seeing if what I said tonight ignites 6 or 7 graduate students here to think very deeply about what the future looks like and whether or not they want to participate at scale or not. That's really what I'm aiming for tonight.
Yeah, so I was interested in your argument about open source, because so many of the national grants that we could apply for to support such projects demand open source. So I'm wondering if you could talk just a little bit about funding our robot production and building businesses and where we're getting the money to do this.
Well, that's actually quite challenging because right now, what I'll call the Silicon Valley approach to things is deeply interested in robots, and they have been for a very long time. So where they're spending money on robots. So I think what we've been able to do is bootstrap our operation. So we don't have any venture money. We're really bad business people. And so we've just built it ratably over time. And out of our university has been supportive, and your universities can and will be supportive. And that's how we've been able to do that. The funding agencies with regard to open source, it depends on the nature of the project, right? So open source is not open source is not open source. And so I think open source is not a bad way to start things, but you have to really think about the sustainability downstream. Because ideologically, that's where I'm at. Pragmatically, I just don't see it. And so I think there are ways to start interesting things, but after a while, when things get serious, then a different set of conversations have to happen. So I realize that's a 50,000-foot answer, not a very good answer. The really good answer is that's really a hard problem. This is 3, right?
There's 4.
Because I'm now like, an hour and 10 minutes past a glass of wine.
So you don't have a robot, but you do have a peer review engine that then analyzes how things are going without faculty getting in the way, or
Yeah.
teachers, right? And that's the key, I think, because there are a lot of people building peer review engines that don't seem to have a lot to do with robots. There's a whole group of people doing that.
Oh, yeah.
So, but that's exciting. I think that's really exciting. But it will really ultimately change the relationship of each teacher to the students that they work with. How can you explain that change in relationship? What you think it's going to look like?
So there's a couple of things there. One is, so we've been around long enough to see whole bunches of people come and go. And it is true that we do provide analytics. So we provide teachers and students with formative assessment data that we help. This is actually a really interesting issue. One of the things we've discovered is how, and I'm not being negative or critical here, how poor our collective formative assessment data literacy is. So when I talk about how important professional learning is for teachers, I'm not denigrating the skill and talent of teachers. I'm saying that what we provide them, for example, and we're not very good, is a really powerful set of formative assessment data that they don't know what to do with. And so it's one thing to provide the analytics, it's another thing to use them effectively as both students and teachers. And so I think that's one of the things that makes us a little bit different from the other people out there is we provide, I think we're actually a little bit better than most people at that. But peer learning is just one way to think about learning and writing. We think it's particularly powerful because one of the problems of learning, particularly if you're teaching 175 students, is the problem of scale. Right? How do you become a very efficient and effective writing teacher? And using those amazing human beings in that classroom we call students, it tends to be a pretty good idea. But it's not magic, it's pedagogy.
Do you have any advice for resisting the influence of technologies like Turnitin at the institutional level, particularly for junior faculty or people who aren't in administrative capacities? How can we help sort of our institutions resist the branding and the advertising that come with these native technologies?
Yeah, so I'm going to speak as a faculty member and an associate provost here and say this. I'm learning how to speak like an associate provost. Did I tell you how awesome it is? It's ridiculous. I don't know what I'm doing as an associate provost. I hope my boss doesn't see this. So 2 things about that. Simple resistance isn't sufficient. And that's been the problem of academic humanists, is we stop at resistance and critique, and we feel good about ourselves, but most of the world just sort of brushes us off. We have to engage. And so speaking both as a faculty member and an administrator, you have to tell me how you want to solve your own problem. You don't want us to deploy this technology on campus? Trust me, at Michigan State, there's a bunch of people who absolutely want this technology on campus. They just don't happen to teach writing. So if it's not enough to resist and critique, you have to solve your own problem. Give us a viable alternative for how you want to teach and learn on this campus. That's part 1. Part 2 is you have no idea how powerful you are. No idea how powerful you are. If you go to the academic technology people and you say, we want to do something that's going to touch even a few hundred students on this campus every semester, they will take you seriously. Because I've seen the learning technology portfolio and the effectiveness data of more than my university, and it's not pretty. We spend a lot of money on technologies for teaching and learning, and we don't have a great idea about which ones work and why. And so if you could put together a positive program for how you want to change the world, people will listen to you. Can I drink a glass of wine? Thank you.